I really wanted to do a podcast for a while, uh, because when you do academic research, you don't really reach all that many people.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example. I have an article. It's considered the definitive article on early U.S. policy towards Israeli settlements, right?
Yeah.
And how many people have ever read that thing? It's been cited a bunch of times, but like what, 200 people have actually read that in the
Yeah.
entire world? And every single one of my episodes gets several times that exposure. So it's
Yeah.
nice to actually have platform that is meaningful,
Yeah.
that you can connect and reach out to people. And of course, academia has also become caught up in jargon
Yeah.
and fashion. You have to follow, if you're not writing about right now, if you're doing history that's not African American studies
Yeah.
or Native studies, I mean, no one cares, for example. And then there's all the jargon in it. If you don't use it, then they won't publish you. If you use it, no one will read it. So the great thing about a podcast, as you know, is you can make high level knowledge accessible to people. So it was a much better application in many ways of my research
Yeah.
skills than anything I've done before. It's far more rewarding than writing academic work. Strangely enough, I didn't think it would be. There's
Yeah.
no comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's really something to, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts about the I think the Greeks called it, somebody told me, the dialogos, where people would have a conversation about something, and that it's much easier to learn by watching people or participating in that conversation, as opposed to going in and wading through documents where, when they did the printing press, you had the scale of being able to push out all of those ideas to people in mass, that you just, before that it was listening to people speak, right, lectures, but that didn't scale at all. But now that we have the internet and these podcasts, all of a sudden, like, these conversations scale in a way that is just much more effective than they used to be. You can have, and Jordan Peterson talks about this, Joe Rogan's talking about this, you can have the best people in the world on a subject, and you just sitting in where, in Hollywood, can participate that in a way. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I got into podcasting, was like, I'm just getting so much out of these conversations that, hell, I want to participate in them. So
Of course, the problem is the democratization of knowledge means you don't know how competent the people who are
well,
giving you the knowledge are.
and I've
And
certainly fallen victim to that before, and still do, I'm sure.
we all do. So you do, if you want to do history, and so many podcasters do this great, have to know how to approach primary documents,
Yeah.
because it's very hard to really learn history from anything other than primary documents, or if you're not basing your research, at least to a great extent,
Yeah.
on primary documents. I mean, I found that when I was doing research on U.S. policy on the settlements, is that everything that everyone says about the topic in secondary sources is wrong,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well,
just because they never read the documents.
one of your recent tweets actually kind of blew me away, where it was, you were talking about how the Bible talks about Eden becoming created from the rib of Adam, that was you, right?
That was not me.
That was
At
not
least
you.
not that
Okay,
I
somebody
remember.
was talking about
No.
this. I'm misremembering the source, but it's like, then they went through the etymology of, like, where the what the root word was, and it was something that just meant side. And
That's right.
it was, so okay, so you're familiar with this idea where, like, where if you just took the King James version of it, rib, it doesn't really make sense. But if you think about it as side, God split Adam in half to create Eve, two complementary sides. Not that one was just made from the piece of a rib, right?
That's right. That's right. The generally speaking, the Tanakh, what we call the Bible, or the Old Testament,
Yep.
is a lot less misogynistic than a lot of the Christian interpretations. Not that it's not
Yeah.
misogynistic in many ways, don't get me wrong, but
Well,
some
the
of the
world's
Christian
a little
interpretations are,
misogynistic. It's
the world's a little misogynistic.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and Judaism took misogyny a step further from its Canaanite ancestors, which is
Okay.
something I'm looking at right now. But yeah, look, we have a serious problem with just accessing what it says in the Tanakh as modern people,
Yeah.
because there's really no way to read it without making an interpretation,
Yeah.
right? So you're talking here about these Christian translations, and Christian translations, either knowingly, in the worst case scenario, or
Yeah.
unknowingly, are making the text conform to the New Testament and the idea of looking for the Messiah in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
And meanwhile, but so Jews say, oh, read the Jewish translations. The Jewish translations are better because they're not introducing a ideology that didn't exist at the time.
Yeah.
So they're better in a lot of ways, but they're also taking out a lot of the historical context. Again, knowingly or unknowingly, there's a lot of hints towards, say, polytheism and things like that in the Tanakh
Yeah.
that are removed, sanitized in the official Jewish translations.
Huh.
And then even, I know Hebrew; it's my native language, so I can sort of read it directly. But then is biblical Hebrew a different language or the same language? Are the words interpreted the same or not? I'm also interpreting it in my own way. So we have a serious problem with accessing it, even when you know Hebrew. And if you learn biblical Hebrew, you're usually trained with a certain amount of ideological baggage behind that, whether that's in the university, whether that's in Jewish religious schools. So we have a real problem accessing the text as it was originally written.